after the brain hears something 2 or 3 times in a row, it's like 3 people say the same thing. Good morning, my name is, my firm is, my job is. Good morning, my name is, my firm is, my job is. The brain is hardwired to scan the environment for variations, because anything that disrupts the pattern, as you mentioned earlier, if it disrupts the cadence of a room, if it upsets the environment, the brain has to pay attention to that because it needs to assess if there is a threat. And we have an ancestral brain. The society's evolved, the brain has not. And so anytime something changes in a room, I'm neurobiologically required to pay attention to it in case it's a bear that wants to eat me. So if you start, after 4 or 5 people have said, good morning, my name is, my firm is, my job is, you start with anything that isn't good morning, my name is, the brain goes, wait, something happened, I have to pay attention. And so if you can then craft something that is interesting, something that drives neurochemistry, like makes us laugh, that's a dopamine hit, or creates like a heart-centered moment that drives some serotonin, the more neurochemistry involved in an experience, the better somebody's memory retention. And so the idea here is, number one, disrupt the pattern, and then number two, say something really interesting.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever time you're listening to the 10 Golden Rules of Internet Marketing for Law Firms podcast, welcome aboard. We've got a great guest today. I'll introduce Chris in just a minute. I want to talk to you about live events. And we just finished our live event. It was awesome. TGR Live, growth strategies for law firms, easy for me to say. What do you guys have coming up in the spring? I'd love to meet up with you at some of the big legal conferences. We're definitely speaking at PILMA. I'm speaking at PILMA, and we've got a booth and sponsorship and stuff. So the Personal Injury Lawyers Mastermind event in Denver, if y'all are going to be in Denver. What else is on your plate? So reach out to me on LinkedIn or your favorite social media. I'd love to connect with you this spring. Without further ado, I'm really, really excited to introduce Chris M. King, the executive witch doctor from Status Flow. He recently presented at our Provisors group, and we'll talk all about that. But he taught us some really great strategies for doing your commercial or your elevator pitch, but doing the non-elevator pitch version of your elevator pitch. And it was really, really awesome. It was one of the best presentations I've ever seen in that format. So Chris and I got together for a little one-on-one. There's your first pro networking tip, is when you meet one of the smartest guys you've seen on a presentation, on a stage or in a meeting, carve out a half an hour one-on-one, a Zoom, or go for coffee with that person. Because if you meet someone super smart like Chris, and I'm sure you're going to feel the same after this meeting, that's a great opportunity to build a relationship. And someone like Chris is a great influencer and networker, and hopefully it'll lead to future opportunities for me, future opportunities for Chris. I mean, he's going to obviously be exposed to our audience. So it's a win-win so far. So Chris, welcome to the 10 Golden Rules Internet Marketing for Law Firms podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I know I'm not a marketing guy per se or a lawyer, so this might be a bit of a departure. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and I don't always want to stick to the program, the lawyer program, but this will be super beneficial because Chris and I met through Provisors. So Provisors is a group I call it like adult networking. I find in that group, there's some pretty sophisticated folks, meaning they're either really good professional networkers or they're business owners or influencers. And so Provisors is a group that's, I guess, 50 or 60% lawyers and 20 or 30% accountants and 20 or 30% the rest of us. But if you are an attorney and you do want a sort of a broader type of or a bigger type of networking opportunity, see if there's a Provisors in your area, because it's a little better than like the local networking groups, in my experience. And I've only been on board for about 6 months. Chris has been on for about 10 years. So maybe let's start with that. Tell us a little bit about Provisors and who it's a good fit for. And
Yeah, it's the engine that I built my business on. I've been in almost 11 years now, and I started with absolutely nothing. I mean, nothing. I didn't, at the time, I had a Provisor membership, I had a beat up sedan, I had a sport coat. So I was like, all right, well, let's see what I can cook with these ingredients. It was either I had a job offer from a guy that does commercial real estate, and it was like, well, either I take a job and learn that business, or I risk starving to death and build my own company. And so I decided, well, this is certainly not the dumbest idea I've ever had. So I'll give it a shot. And, here we are almost 11 years later, and I'm loving it, just loving my life.
And Provisors groups, like our group meets on Zoom, but I know some groups meet in person as well, right?
Yeah. I've been in, as you said, over 10 years now, and it is a professional networking group. These are professional service providers, and as you mentioned, it's like 60% attorneys. There's a lot of insurance. There's a lot of all manner of B2B and B2C professional service providers, and it's a fantastic network in that, now there's 10,300 members nationwide, and they're in many markets throughout the country. And so while there's the opportunity for referral business in and out, there's also the opportunity for resources. Like my clients just, if they have a need for something, they don't go scouring. They just say, call Chris, he knows everybody, and I can connect them with the people that they need.
Great. Tell us a little bit about your journey. Where did it get started? What kind of jobs did you have? And then tell us a little bit about status flow.
Yeah, well, I've done a bit of everything. So I never had one career trajectory. I came up in tech, and that's kind of where my background started. My old man is an engineer, and so I had maybe a predisposition towards tech. But I've done all manner of things. I at one point in my life, I did inside sales for variable area flow meters. I was an AM/FM radio broadcaster, air talent, and program director for a while. I did restoration and maintenance of natural stone at one point. I was a marketing director for a marketing services company, so marketing the marketing company, right? I've kind of been all over the map. At the end of the day, what I finally learned how to do was monetize being myself. I mean, my job is basically to be me and put that into service. And I can't think of a better thing. And now my job is to make seemingly impossible things happen very quickly for individuals and organizations.
That's interesting. Maybe we'll delve into that for a second. They say that if you can find something, if you can do what you love for a job, you're going to love your job. Kind of obvious, but
Mhm.
there's a lot to that, right? First of all, you got to figure out what you love to do, and then you've got to figure out a way to make a living at it. How did you find that? And talk a little bit more about how other people can find that.
Yeah, I tell you, it was a lot of trial and error. What I first learned to do was start tracking sort of my history, my own personal history, things about me that other people have said, even going all the way back to grammar school. My teachers consistently said I was disruptive. Well, I couldn't agree more. When I stopped looking at that as a liability, anything about me, right? None of it is a liability. All of it is a gift. And if I can figure out how it's a gift, then I can put it into service. I can use it. So that's the first thing, is recognize everything is a gift. Number two, track your history. I have a history of pulling off things that I have really no business being able to succeed at. And so the whole core of my business now is it's all oriented around moonshots. How do we make that seemingly impossible thing happen? Because what I learned in both my education and my training and my personal and professional history is that there is a science to making impossible things happen. And the science is scalable. So you can apply it to a business, you can apply it to a person. The results we get are really, when I talk about some of the things that we're able to do in this organization for our clients, it sounds really grandiose, like there's no way that's possible. No, we do it every day.
That's awesome. So Status Flow is the organization. Tell us a little bit about that, how it came to be, and what it looks like day to day for your clients.
Yeah, it started as a performance coaching and consulting organization with a specific focus on what we call flow, what athletes call being in the zone, runner's high. It has a lot of different names, but it's all driven by neurochemistry. And so if you set conditions and behaviors across a team or in an organization, you can produce flow states. And this is where you get exponential increases in speed and creativity. You lower, if not eliminate, stress levels. Everything gets better. And as the organization evolved over the years, flow became a tool that we use, but not so much the thing that we offer. What we're offering now is the goal of your dreams, the life of your dreams, the organization, the team, the achievement, the accomplishment that you thought was completely out of reach. We bring that to our clients, and that's really where the magic happens for me. Like I said, it was very personal for me. An example from my own personal life: I was 21 years old, and I decided I wanted to become an NCAA ice hockey player. There were two things in my way at the time. Number one, I was failing out of my junior college. And number two, I had never skated before. But fast forward 18 months, I was leading that team into the state championships. Once I learned that there was a science to how I was able to make that happen, well, now I can apply that to anybody, anytime.
That's unbelievable. I mean, I
It's crazy,
skated.
right? Like,
I,
there's no
I,
way. Like,
I'm a Canadian. I skated since I was 6 or 7. I also played college hockey, but I was the goalie, so I wasn't. But I was the best skating goalie.
Well, there you, well, so your goal, that means you were somebody's little brother. So that's right.
No,
That's
no, no. It was the opposite. It was like when I went out to play whatever it was, like the regional local hockey, and looking for the word, but I couldn't skate. So they stuck me in goal because
Oh,
the other
wow.
kids started a year before me.
Right.
Uh, But it was great. I mean, hockey was great for me. But I
Mm.
can't imagine you played college hockey without skating. So
Yeah,
18
it
years
took
of
me a while. I
skating,
mean,
you must have been an athlete.
I would say I had natural athletic ability, but I didn't play. I wrestled in high school for like a year, and that was the end of that. So I didn't have a history of it or anything. I just wanted it bad enough. And now let me put an asterisk on this. It was Division II in Southern California. Okay, we're not talking Boston College or something. That's a whole different
That was my
level.
next question, by the way.
So yeah, still Division II. It was the Pacific Collegiate Hockey Association, Southern California at the time. When I tell people about that, they're like, "How did you do that?" I'm like, "Well,
So
science."
my Toronto Beer League team would have taken you guys down easily, but
I would say that your Toronto junior high school team would have taken like the middle school team would have
yeah,
taken us down.
that's great though. So it was a lot of fun, and you had that hockey team experience. That's great. I love it. Maybe give me an example of a client, how you've helped them achieve their goals and what kind of goals they had.
Yeah, I'll give you two that really hit home. So there was a woman she's a business owner in Texas, and she hired me for the general business performance stuff. We want to get better, we want to increase our revenues, and just standard improved business stuff. But she had a lot of stuff going on in her personal life. And if you have a lot of friction in your personal life, that's going to affect your business life. It's just the way the brain works, and it's just how life works. And so fast forward, a few things needed to happen to really set her free. She ended up getting a divorce, which was really necessary. So we got her divorced, we got the house in the divorce, and we got the house refinanced, so she was better resourced. We got her off of her anti-anxiety medication, off of her antidepressant medication. We more than doubled her business. She dropped 45 pounds, and we did it all in 13 months.
Sweet, love it.
I
And do you have
had
a clear example of a lawyer law firm that you've worked with?
Yeah, you know what? It's actually fairly rare that I work with the law as an industry, because the law as an industry, the way that it's set up is kind of diametrically opposed to the earlier mentioned flow states. And so there's certain areas we can have success, others not so much. And so it's a little limited, but we did take a gig with a law firm in Southern California. 60% of their business was coming from construction defect, which what I learned was a very unprofitable area of the law, in that it takes forever to get paid. They want to renegotiate every single bill that goes out. It's really frustrating. And they said, how do we pivot the business so that that's maybe 15%, 20% of our revenues, because that makes the organization much more profitable. And so we had to get really innovative really quick, because we didn't want to lose business while we made a pivot, but we were able to do that. We were sort of able to pass a baton from one area to another. And it took us about 8, 9 months to sort of complete that. But I think we got it down to about, I think it was about 18% was the revenue from that, without losing incremental business.
Yeah. What's a quick tip for an executive or a business to get into flow state?
Well, yeah, I don't know that there is any quick tip. I would say that there are a lot of flow blockers, and they are common and they are rampant. So distraction is going to be very high on that list. Normally it'll take most people about 20 minutes to get into a flow state. And every time you get distracted, you reset that clock. So your phone going off, the kids making noise in the other room, you stop, like anything that interrupts the pattern is going to reset the clock. And so you've got to structure your work area, your work life, so that the distractions are minimized, if not eliminated.
That sounds like a great tip. What do you know about music? I'll tell you this story quickly. When I was a kid, I used to put music on when I had to study.
Mhm.
And of course, it was like classic rock, Q107. But my mom would come in and she would say, turn that music off. You've got to finish your studying.
Mhm.
And as soon as she left the room, I wanted to turn it back on. And I did. It was quieter. And then now, if I'm really up against it and I have like 10 minutes to finish a couple slides for a presentation, I will take 1 minute of that 10 minutes, turn on Pandora, find a classical mix, and it helps me. Like those 9 minutes will be way better if I have some background music. Like it can't be
Mhm.
something super distracting like rap or something that my mind would enter my mind. So I studied this a little bit when I started podcasting many years ago. And I learned that there's auditory learners. and 25% of people are auditory learners. And they're the kind of people who would prefer to listen to an audiobook than read a book. They're the kind
Hmm.
of people who love a little music in the background. And
Hmm.
they're the kind of people who listen to podcasts for the most part. I
Hmm.
think the world's caught up with podcasts, and it might be like 35% now. But really a significant, like I couldn't understand why everybody didn't love podcasts 15 years ago. So what do you know about music relative to flow state, relative to podcasts, audiobooks?
Yeah, I mean, well, you hit it on the head in that how one person learns can be different from how another learns. As I think I mentioned earlier, what gets me into flow is not going to be what gets you into flow. It's kind of personalized in that way. I would say with music, make sure it's something that you can sort of ignore. It sort of blends with what you're doing as opposed to distracts from what you're doing. And that has to do with energy and frequencies, I think. The reading thing, you're right. Some people learn better with an audiobook. And even if you speed it up a little bit, my reading speed compared to my listening speed, there's a huge delta there. And if you're a particularly slow reader like I am, the brain can take in way more words per minute than I can read. And so there's a lot of space in between stuff. And that's why I'll end up sort of daydream. I have to read the same page 3 times because I keep skipping off the atmosphere and going somewhere else, right? And so I learned, to your point, like audiobooks speed it up a little bit for me, like at 1.5, 1.7. My comprehension and my retention is much better. And so it becomes a question of understanding, how do I learn, what works for me. The trick to this, I tell you what the real trick to this is though, Jay, you got to let go of the idea that there's something wrong with you, that, oh, because I can't do it this way, I'm broken, I'm screwed up, there's something wrong. No, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that's not the way to access your brain, and the best way to access your brain, your retention. So you got to release that judgment that something's wrong.
Alex Harmozy is a pretty hot trainer, business trainer, marketing trainer. He says that you should read a book and listen to a book if it's really important and really valuable business. Do you think he's just trying to sell an audiobook and a real book, or what do you think about that concept?
I get careful about suggesting what someone's intentions are. I can say that there have been many times when I've listened to a book and then gone and bought the hard copy because, like, ooh, there's stuff I want to highlight or underline. And sometimes I'll even listen to it while I read it if it's something really good. But yeah, I can't say what his intentions
Yeah,
are.
no, I'm not. As a matter of fact, he's awesome. I highly recommend his stuff.
He's got great stuff. I've seen him
Yeah,
online.
his last audio, I bought the book as well, and it was great. And the last 4 or 5 business books that were highly recommended, and I was waiting to read or whatever, I did the audio and print version and took notes and folded corners and the whole deal. So uh,
Nice.
I do recommend that, and not for everyone because obviously it sort of doubles up the time. Although it doesn't though, because if you're reading a book and then you go to the gym, you can bang out a chapter in like 10, 15 minutes,
Yeah.
and just sort of reinforces what you read, or vice
Mhm.
versa. If you listen to it first, then it's like those learning modalities you talked about. I think
Mhm.
it accesses different learning modalities.
Yeah, yeah, doodling can be really great for learning when if you're on a phone, if you're on a conference call, or maybe listening to something. Like some people doodle while they do this, it really supports memory retention.
Interesting. And do you have to doodle like stuff that you're hearing?
No, not necessarily. When I was young, if you weren't like paying direct attention, the teacher would assume that you were just off in la la land or something. But it's like, no, you can be doodling swirls, whatever doodling is to you. It doesn't have to be relative to the thing, but it can really support learning.
It's like right brain creativity engaged. Let's double back on where we met. And we met at a Provisors, and
Hmm.
you had this amazing exercise where you
Mm.
asked everyone to not do the standard elevator pitch. And
Hmm.
it was really energizing, really fantastic. It's about pattern interruption and
Hmm.
hacking networking. Why don't you talk a little bit about what not to do and what to do in both the standard Zoom networking and also in live networking opportunities?
Yeah, what I say in this work is that personality doesn't scale, but the science does. And this is just leveraging brain science, right? Like at the end of the day, I'm a systems hacker, right? Everything is a system. A business, a team, a human being is a system. And any system can be hacked if you understand how that system works. And when you start hacking human systems, we can talk about optimization or whatever. The things with an elevator pitch, particularly in a networking room and something like Provisors in particular, most people don't even understand what the point of an elevator pitch is. The overwhelming majority will be to explain what you do. That's what people will say. What's an elevator pitch for? To explain what you do, to teach people. Nobody gives a crap what you do, right? Until they give a crap. And so the point of an elevator pitch is to make somebody interested. It's to get somebody curious. And so the way to start that process is in something like a room where everybody's doing the same thing. And most elevator pitches are going to sound something like, good morning, my name is, my firm is, my job is, my client is, blah, blah, blah. That's really uninteresting. But after the brain hears something 2 or 3 times in a row, it's like 3 people say the same thing. Good morning, my name is, my firm is, my job is. Good morning, my name is, my firm is, my job is. The brain is hardwired to scan the environment for variations, because anything that disrupts the pattern, as you mentioned earlier, if it disrupts the cadence of a room, if it upsets the environment, the brain has to pay attention to that because it needs to assess if there is a threat. And we have an ancestral brain. The society's evolved, the brain has not. And so anytime something changes in a room, I'm neurobiologically required to pay attention to it in case it's a bear that wants to eat me. So if you start, after 4 or 5 people have said, good morning, my name is, my firm is, my job is, you start with anything that isn't good morning, my name is, the brain goes, wait, something happened, I have to pay attention. And so if you can then craft something that is interesting, something that drives neurochemistry, like makes us laugh, that's a dopamine hit, or creates like a heart-centered moment that drives some serotonin. The more neurochemistry involved in an experience, the better somebody's memory retention. And so the idea here is, number 1, disrupt the pattern. And then number 2, say something really interesting.
So I don't know if I did a great job, but you didn't give me a ton of coaching after. So I remember I said something like, when I was 12 years old, I got cut from my hockey team. And I had been the star goalie on the team the year before. And when on the drive home, my dad said to me, he said, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And with that incident, I learned a whole new level of preparedness, fitness, coaching, training, and I would never let that happen again. And I've been able to carry that throughout my business career. And we always come super prepared for our meetings with our clients. So something like that was...
That's brilliant, right? That's because you told me something personal about you. So I feel somewhat connected to you. It's a human story, so it's much more interesting than just dry, good morning, my name is whatever. And you give me an idea of what makes you particularly good at what you do. Like, oh, there's a lesson that he learned. A lot of people can have your work history or your educational background, your pedigree. Nobody's got that story of when you were that age and that happened and how you related to it and what you've done with it since then, right? Like that's a great story arc and it's interesting. And so something along those lines is going to be much better and much more interesting. It's going to make people go, wow, Jay's really interesting. I want to talk to that guy. And that is the point.
And the other thing that I think you shared that was so valuable is when you're in a networking group, and the way the format goes, you start with some kind of icebreaker, and then you get into your news about the chapter or the group, and then generally go into your commercials. And like you're saying, everyone does a 45 or 60-second commercial. And whether it's in person or whether it's on a Zoom, they tend to get pretty boring. And so what I've always tried to do is do something different every time. I used to work in ad agencies and we used to make commercials, but commercials, the best commercials tell a story, they have music, they have emotion. So I always try and come with a case study one week, a new product one week, talk about my conference the next week, talk about my podcast, educate, talk about something I learned that would be valuable for people in their networking or their business. So is that valuable as well, that you shouldn't use that same pattern interruption every time, right?
It depends, right? This is where I'm going to sound like an attorney. It depends, right? Because it has to be aligned with your brand. Like my brand is kind of magical. It's kind of scary. It's awesome. It's edgy. I'm irreverent. And so what's on brand for that is what's going to work. Somebody listening right now remembers a commercial that went through their entire childhood. For me, there was a Ford dealership in Long Beach. And it was Cal Worthington and his dog Spot. And it was the same commercial, but now the dog Spot was like a giraffe or an alligator or a chimpanzee or what, like the animal changed all the time and they would run the specials of the car. But every commercial started with, it's Cal Worthington and his dog Spot. And I heard that all growing up. And so it was the same all the time. Now, my brand and my company, There is no color by numbers. It is different client to client every single time. So it is random and chaotic. So my elevator pitches tend to be random and chaotic. And so it's a question of what aligns with the brand. There's one guy that's been using the same elevator pitch for, I think, about 50 something years now. He's a hard money lender in Southern California, and he does his elevator pitch to the point where 40 people in the room recite it with him. Like they all know him, they all know it, and it works for him, right? So again, there's no one size fits all.
That's cool. So give us an example of a good one that you have used in a room where people know you, where you've been there for multiple years.
Well, I joke about this. The first time you're hearing my thoughts is the first time I'm hearing my thoughts. But I'll tell you what, you mentioned music. Mark Twain said the two most important days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. And whether it's a company or a team within a company or an entity, that there's a purpose for its existence. And that purpose is like this incredible piece of sheet music that has never been played before in human history. That company, that team, that person is the perfect instrument and musician to play that music. My job is to tune that instrument and train that musician.
I love it. Just immediately have to start listening and paying attention.
Right. So nobody knows what I do, but I say, I might give an example. A client called me up. She said her sheet music was she wanted to double her business, eliminate her stress, and save her marriage. Took us 4 months. That's the kind of thing that we're doing. They have a seemingly impossible, no way could I pull this off. I got a referral from a guy in Boca for a forensic accounting firm in New York. They said they want to double their business in the next 5 years. I said, that's totally doable. How about we do it in 2?
Love it.
I think we can do it in 2. I mean, certainly 3, but 5? Nah, I do it in 3.
So I'm sure you know, but I'll explain for everybody else. Simon Sinek did one, I think the most viewed TED Talk of all time, about finding your why. So what's your why?
There's a couple. I don't like being told no. I don't like being told what can't be done. I like doing the things that defy the odds. When I was in grade school, my teachers consistently said that I was disruptive. I couldn't agree more. I won't follow the rules. I don't care about the status quo. I know there's always more available. And I want to prove that every single time. So when somebody says double my business in 5 years, nah, let's do it in 2. And then they look at me, they'll ask me, can we do that? I said, well, if you let me, yeah. Because I understand the science behind it. And I'll give you a piece of it right here, right now, just for giggles. Human beings, just through the lens of psychology and neuroscience and energy fields, humans produce the reality of their belief or understanding or expectation. Like it's how we're wired. We don't even see things as they are. We see them as we expect them, need them, want them to be. And so there's something called the Bannister principle. This is the 4-minute mile guy, if you're familiar with it, right? Yeah. So for decades, the world was obsessed with the idea of seeing a human run a mile in under 4 minutes, and nobody did it until Roger Bannister did it in 1954. And after decades of people trying, his record only lasted 46 days because what we believed was possible changed. And as soon as you believe it to be possible, you can create that eventuality, but you got to buy in first.
It's interesting because for many years I had this level in my business and we'd kind of hit this number and then fall back a little bit and hit that number, but we could never break through. Thankfully, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've sort of tripled that number. But what is it about that set level that we have? It wasn't in my head. I certainly had bigger goals and aspirations.
Well, what you want and what you believe are not the same thing, and it has to do with energy and frequencies. And like I said, what you are holding in your consciousness. If I ask somebody, how long would it take you to write a book? If they believe it'll take 6 months, it will. If they believe it'll take 6 years, it will. I actually had a guy in a Provisor meeting many years ago. He was kind of being a jackass because at the time there were not a lot of people that weren't lawyers or accountants or whatever. And he said, so you're some kind of coach, huh? I was like, well, yeah, I guess you can call it that. If you want to go with that, sure. And he said, all right, well, can you coach me on my golf game? I said, maybe. What's going on? And he said, okay. He says, I shot 78 4 times. I can't shoot 77. What am I doing wrong? I said, you just told me. If you are holding it like right there in that sentence, I can't shoot 77. You're not gonna. I said, of course you can. If you shot 78 on a golf course 4 times, you bet your ass you can shoot 77. It's one putt, it's one chip, it's one good shot, right? Of course you can make 77. But he was holding it as this locked out and said, yeah, I don't know if he ever achieved 77. I don't think I ever saw him again.
Yeah, those skeptics you rarely do.
Yeah, but people are oriented toward creating and validating and recreating the reality of their understanding. It's just organized around safety and safety, comfort, familiarity. And once you break through that, the world changes.
So part of your coaching, obviously, is people want to get to a goal and you help them get there. Do you do a lot of planning? What annual planning or business planning tips would you share?
I'll tell you what part of my process on this for an organization. Meeting one, they're going to want to bring me all the things in terms of their KPIs, their market trends, their sales history. I said, don't bring me any of that stuff. I don't want to see any of it because all that's going to do is retard what I think is possible. And so when I go in and we just start talking about the architecture and what's going on and how does this business look and what's the idea, like this forensic accounting firm, when they started telling me about how they were going to do it, I'm like, that's prudent. That's very, very what I would call common strategy and common thinking. I don't do common. I do, are you kidding me right now? And so I need uncommon thinking. I need uncommon. I need a whole different frequency of the architecture. And so this is like, no, I'm not going to design a building with Roman columns or Greek or whatever it is. I'm not an architect. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to do what I know is going to work. But it's going to cross a lot of lines. It's going to break a lot of boundaries. It's going to be very unconventional. And a lot of it, just like flow states, very counterintuitive. But that's how magic happens.
That's awesome. I love it. So we're into the quick one-liners portion of today's podcast. And for the regular listeners, they've heard them before. What apps or techniques do you use for personal productivity?
That's a trick question with me. I don't do productivity. I'm not particularly interested in efficiency, productivity. I'm interested in leverage, input to output ratio. How do I get a whole lot more using a whole lot less? So the first thing you do is take every meeting you have, recurring meeting, weekly or monthly, cut it in half. I bet an hour meeting, cut it in half. I'll give you 40 hours back in your month just by doing that.
I love it. No, that's a great idea.
You absolutely can. I got a company right now that no meeting that they have is more than 15 minutes at this point. They're like, they took it to an extreme. I was like, wow, okay, you go.
Yeah, because when you cut it again, cut the hour meeting into half hour, cut the half hour into 15.
Yeah, like I said, as soon as you go with I can't because, well, you're just going to produce that reality. What if you're wrong? What if you can? Most of the time we can cut those meetings in half, get a lot of time back in the month.
Yeah, there's only one asterisk I'd put on that is you also have to get people to show up on time.
Yeah, but there's a trade-off there. You show up on time, I will give you 40 hours back in your month.
Yeah.
That's what you're paying. You're paying with be on time. That's it. When I got a radio background, the 5 o'clock news doesn't start at 5:01. Let's go. Right.
I love it. Yeah, no, because we actually cut a lot of our 1 hour meetings to half hour.
Yeah.
We just
You
tighten it in a
absolutely
little
can.
bit. But if the client shows up 10 minutes late, now you've got 20 minutes. Now it's a little tight.
It's going to get tight.
We'll make it work, but you're always pushing. The 2 o'clock meeting ends at 2:35, and then you're pushing every other meeting.
Yeah, see, I don't work it that way. I'm more like an airport. Just because this flight was delayed doesn't mean I'm gonna next. It's like, nope, that's the one that got missed. We're just gonna reschedule or whatever. If somebody's 10 minutes late, then great. It's a 20-minute meeting. You better get real quick, real quick.
By the way, pro tip: this is something I've been using, and it's normally true. I'm sorry, we got to end this meeting in 5 minutes because I have to start the next Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And so you blame the Zoom account, not the fact that you're not totally interested in the content of the meeting.
Well, I don't do any blame. It's about personal responsibility and boundaries. The same way good fences make good neighbors, good boundaries makes good relationships. And so it's, hey, I'm up against a wall right now, and so we're going to pick this up later. Nobody gets mad about that. They understand and respect boundaries.
Do you have a personal wellness and fitness routine? And does any of it involve getting on skates?
None of it involves skates at this point. I've retired.
Me too.
But yeah, I'm in the gym every day. My day starts no later than 4:30. I get up, and I'm in Southern California, my business is nationwide, so it depends on when my meetings start. Sometimes they start even 4:30 in the morning, so I'll offset my schedule, but I'm in the gym every day before about 9 a.m. at the latest.
Awesome. Best business books.
It depends. It depends on what your business is and what you're looking for. I mean, there are some kind of go-to things. Atomic Habits, that's a great one. Anything by Stephen Kotler, I think, is great. Kotler. He's one of my mentors and teachers at Flow Research Collective. I think The Obstacle is the Way, I think, is great. Pressfield's book, The War of Art, is a great one. And Anti-Fragile.
Oh, that's great. Great list. Blogs, podcasts, and YouTubes. What do you subscribe to? And when it hits your feed, you stop everything else and go flip to that one.
I listen to Joe Rogan quite a bit because he makes me laugh. He's pretty balanced. I mean, I like the way he thinks. What else? I mentioned the Flow Research Collective, stuff that has to do around flow. I like things like I like the personal development stuff. Brene Brown, Byron Katie. I think there's a lot of great stuff out there. There's so much,
Awesome.
right? There's just so much.
Who's your NFL or sports team?
Okay, this is where I make no friends at all. I sort of quit sports the same way people might quit alcohol or smoking, because I'm from LA, born and raised, and I was a Rams fan and everything, and I was a big hockey guy. At one point, I was a walking hockey encyclopedia. I knew it all. And I just realized I was spending so much energy on that, and I would listen to everybody talk about their fantasy teams. I'm like, what would I be doing if I wasn't doing that? And then I realized I'd be bending reality and making impossible things happen. And so I sort of gave up on it. I love watching the occasional game, but I'm not invested the way I was.
Was it Wayne Gretzky moving to the LA Kings that got you hooked on hockey, or?
No, it was a girl.
I
met a girl, and she was, of all things, a hockey fan, and I got super into it. And then I started playing. There had to be a reason.
And so what's a great introduction for you and your business?
I'll tell you my favorite, because I mentioned a couple of those clients, but there's a B2B side of the business and the B2C side. B2C or B2B is all project stuff, but I tell you the B2C side is 80% of our clients have been executive professional women, including lawyers, actually. And so my running joke has been, call me when you know a professional or executive woman who is overwhelmed, burned out, and probably kind of irritated with her husband. That is my client.
Great. And you also do some speaking and whatnot. Are there great introductions? Where would you like to speak?
Yeah, I do a lot of speaking engagements for industries that have a strong feminine presence. I do a lot in real estate. I did the Christie's International Real Estate Expo a couple of years ago. Corporate rah-rah events, retreats, and things like that. Getting me to talk is easy. Getting me to shut up is kind of a trick. So there's that.
That's a typical title of a talk.
There was one I was doing for a while, Optimize You, which was the neuroscience and psychology of peak performance. I've got one, Bending Reality, how to make these quantum jumps in your life. Like I said, nobody came here to this planet just to work hard, pay taxes, and die. And one of my teachers, Dr. Robert Holden, he's got a great quote, says, if there's something missing from your life, it's probably you. And I thought that was pretty cool. I'm like, yeah, let's not do that.
I love that. And last question, where can people get in touch with you?
You can go to statusflow.net. Of course, we got everything is there. Instagram, I don't know. I'm not in charge of my own marketing. Yeah, statusflow.net. That's where to get a hold of me.
Chris, great energy. Thanks for bringing it today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the 10 Golden Rules of Internet Marketing for Law Firms podcast. Please send questions and comments to podcast@10goldenrules.com. That is podcast@TENGoldenrules.com.